Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new season of Transformed You. I'm Mark DeJesus here with my wife, Melissa.
Hello, everyone.
And we're happy to be back. We're going to get into some new stuff. Thank you for all those of you who were praying for me because after the end of last season, I had a hand in a cast off of a stump incident.
Little incident.
Fractured my hand. It's healing well. I have the cast off, so I'm able to type, which is great.
Right, but we also learned that Max probably couldn't help you in a 911 situation.
Yeah, that's
he would only care about pizza.
Did we tell everybody that?
I don't know. Probably not.
I was pushing
so
this.
to say that joke, you probably need to explain.
Yeah, I was pushing this large stump out that I'd spent so long digging out, and I asked my son to help me. And
Bless his heart.
It blessed his heart, but it slipped back on my pinky, fractured it, and I knew I did something
your
bad.
Hand got fractured, not your pinky, right?
Well, it's right,
like in there, yeah.
Yeah, right in that metacarpal, metatarsal.
Wait, toes or carpal tarsal? I don't know.
In one of those,
this is not good because we're doing the human body with the kids in biology too.
In one of the metas, it got messed up right here, and anyway, I didn't know what happened in the moment. I'm like, Max. And he got distracted, went inside, and on his way in, he was like, "Are you ordering the pizza?"
Yeah. Can we get pizza now? Sure, Max. We love our little bubby, but he's in his own world. It's all right.
So anyways, we're back with a new season. My hand healing got us caught up on some of the things that's taking place for our next book launch. Got a little behind on some of it, but now we're back in gear. I'm actually working on the finishing touches on the audiobook. We have a book launch support program. We'll put a link to that in the show notes if you're interested in jumping into that. And usually it's on the side of our blog. You can find it there. So excited about that coming out later this fall. But what we're going to do now is get into a season where we're going to address a subject that not a lot of people like necessarily run to, but it's something that's really important. That's a subject of fear. And we want to talk about how to address this subject in an empowering way, but we have to be willing to face some stuff in our lives. And so the goal, I think we'll see, Lord willing, the creek don't rise, and how we kind of navigate through this, of how we, in facing our fears, how it's really changed our life.
Yeah, but before we do that, can I just jump back to something you just said, is why don't we like the word fear? Why don't we like to use that word? Why? Yeah. What do you think it is? That people are like, I'm good. I don't really have fear.
Well, you just kind of answered it in the sense that we're in denial of how much fear affects us because the majority of people live our lives from a standpoint of moving to comfort as quickly as possible. It's like even to this day, there's a part in me that's like, oh, I've stepped through, I've taken risks, I've jumped out into such and such area, and then you kind of want to just relax.
Yeah.
And so that's fine, but that relaxing can make us emotionally lazy where we just want to be comfortable. So we run from discomfort, move to comfort, and that becomes our gauge. Then I feel like we have like totally relabeled all our fears.
Right, like fear's a dirty word. It's like, don't say fear. It's like it's the dirty word, right?
Yeah.
People don't like to say, yeah, I'm really fearful about that.
Correct.
Yeah.
The average person, if you ask them, do you have fear? They'll say no.
Right.
But we're paralyzed by fear.
In every area, right.
I would say maybe even in my own history, I would have said that too until I became self-aware of what fear actually is. I work with a number of people who say, I got to work on some anxiety issues. Okay, so tell me what your fears are. I don't really have any. It's like, wait, we've relabeled this into many different ways. I don't have fear, I'm just concerned. Oh, I just have worry issue. That's not fear. It's like all those areas are a form of fear.
Right.
So
I will admit I have fallen into that sometimes. It's almost like it's a pride thing, right?
I agree.
In a way. If I was to say about my own journey, I would think saying, yeah, I'm really fearful about that. It feels weak. I think saying that you have fear feels weak, don't you think?
Yeah, it's to go with what you were saying about.
It's like it's a weak, I don't know. I guess I feel that way. So anyways, go
well,
ahead.
you were saying the pride.
Right.
Really underneath it all, isn't it just shame?
Yeah, it is.
Like if I admit
Yeah.
I'm fearful, then it's shame against me. And it makes me that I'm a lower person. I have less value. I'm not as strong. I'm not as courageous as other people. And I think coming to an awareness of the fears that you have in your life is the first step of honesty and the first step of actually getting somewhere in your life, because then you start knowing what you're up against.
So true.
You know, I don't know that I've ever had an area of my life that I haven't grown tremendously or had something good happen that I didn't face a fear. And I would say most of our fears lurk in hiding. Like, we avoid many areas. We kind of slide into not really challenging ourselves. And we're really good at like just keeping it hidden. And we've been conditioned in that. It's not to make people feel bad. It's just an awareness. For example, I would say of all the topics that I talk about and do, fear often is one of the lower tracking things that draws people to content on my site, even though it's one of the biggest ones that I work on, because I have to spend most of my time helping people to understand, no, this is actually a subject you need to work on.
Right.
You know? And
Right.
Modern culture, we have a tendency to become very weak in this. Weak in the sense that we're constantly looking to how we can make our life comfortable and make it more convenient. And we don't realize we're actually weakening ourselves, because every day you actually need to stretch yourself. You need to face your fears. You actually need to take steps where you're moving towards what you're always avoiding.
Right. And to tag along with that point of the word avoidance, it's making me really think about the fact that when we're usually talking about what we don't realize is fear, but it is fear. Sorry, I keep messing with the mic. It is in a lot of ways, we are victim to our circumstances. So like, let's take, say, a tragedy that happens out in the world or things like that. We blame, well, I don't really want to go out of the house today because I don't want to deal with it. Whoa, there's all these things happening. And really, it's not dealing with ourselves and needing to face that and say, no, I need to go do this because I have to get this done. All right, I'm using a basic thing. It's really being a victim and not stepping out, stretching yourself. No, I need to do this. I need to go visit this person. I need to do this. And so I think in a lot of our current day fears, we blame the world. We see this going on. We're blaming everybody else but ourselves and not facing those things in our life that we need to step out in, overcome, push through, whatever.
Right. Like very circumstantial kind of look of like watching the news. Oh, it's really bad. So I got to find ways to like retreat or hide.
Right. So then with all of those things, I think it's subtle in where it's getting in people's mindsets. And so it then goes into, let's just take that. Okay, I saw something that happened on the news. I don't really feel like I feel fearful. I'm not going to leave the house today. So that means now you're not engaging people. You may not go visit friends, relatives. And I think that's the thing that starts to compound when we're looking at fear. There's a compounding effect to it that then is affecting everything around us.
Right. And you go into either your body has a fight or flight mechanism, and it's a great name because it's either you're going to gear up, narrowly focus in on this because that's your fight mode. It might be like you're actually fighting, or it might be you're obsessed and you have a phobic fear and you're focused on this, or you have a flight, which is an avoidance.
Right.
And I think the avoidance thing is a huge factor. We are avoiding things, and then we're going, God, break through. But what we do is we're praying for God to do something that is a convenient pathway for us.
Right.
Like convenient. Like, I'm going to pray this thing is going to just show up and be handed to me because that's how God works, right?
Right. Wait,
no.
Like one of the most dangerous commercials I think is out there, and you'll probably laugh when I say this. Most dangerous commercials is the Publishers Clearinghouse commercial. Where they ring your door. You just send in your mailers. You really don't have to do much, okay? Although they do say you should buy stuff. But anyways, they ring your doorbell and bring you a check. You're doing nothing. You're just sitting there waiting for the money to come. People live for this.
Right.
And it's subliminal, right? Don't do anything and we'll just give you everything you need.
It's
not good.
It's very dangerous because the church can tag in on that because
we do this with God.
Right. We pray for a God that is up there to do something, to deliver something down here, and there's a disconnect in that. No, I'm actually afraid to take a step.
Right. Is your phone ringing?
Yeah, I don't know. It's here somewhere.
Like I'm hearing noises.
But it's like we're not willing to take that step and be able to move out. And I think that's what we need to get more honest about. We use waiting on the Lord to many times mask over our fears. I'm waiting on the Lord.
Right.
So what are you doing right now? Well, I'm just waiting on the Lord. So
he'll come to me. He'll knock on the front door. He'll bring the person I'm supposed to marry. He'll tell me where I'm supposed to go on that mission trip.
Right. Zero faith.
It'll come in a pretty package, like the Publishers Clearinghouse check. It'll come with a bow on it. Right. It'll say exactly what it is. For life, I'm going to take care of this. And this is what we do to God. It's a problem.
That's not faith. That's the thing we have to get honest about. We go, well, it is faith because I'm believing. No, you're sitting.
It's going to happen.
Faith is active. It's risk. It's risk. It's like putting yourself out there. It's like, doing something that might not work out or taking a step or putting something on the line and actively doing. You never see people in the Bible just sitting, so to speak. They're actively in something and God meets them in the doing. And so fear has conditioned us to be very passive. And now we have this like, oh God, I pray for my finances that you'll break through. Okay, well, engage in that. What does that look like for you to have a different faith? That's why James said, you could talk to me all day about your faith. Show me your works. Because he wasn't saying we earn anything by our works. He's saying your faith will be proven by the fact that you're being active in agreement with what God is doing, and you're facing your fears.
Yeah.
You're facing those areas. And I think that we're seeing the result in often our times in our lives of a manifestation of a lack of us facing our fears.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think was a game changer for us, in that I made the decision, you made the decision, and I feel like we both operate in certain boldness areas where you might be more bold in facing fear in an area than I am, and I might be more bold in facing a fear than you are, right? But it encourages us. We made a decision. We're going to face these fearful areas rather than placate them, rather than just keep it as like the caged tiger, like, okay, I don't want to ruffle this. I don't want to risk anything. So let's just put him in a cage. And really, you are meant to go out there and face the lions, tigers, and bears.
Yeah. And I think too, you've brought this up before when it comes to the Christian culture and what success looks like in the church. Right. And right now we have a culture that if you make a ton of money, then God is in it and everything must be working and he's right there and he's opened all these doors for you. No, what we need to start understanding and get better at, which I think past generations really understood the power of this. We're watching right now, we're going through the series of Little House on the Prairie, and it's a really good opportunity for us to even teach our kids what it was like. Back then they were real solid Bible. I'm just talking about Little House on the Prairie, but it's a good representation of like the Bible believing, if some of us today had to live back then and go through what they went through, like there's some of that sometimes we need a little bit to press up against us and teach us like, no, you need to stay in this. It doesn't look like anything's going to happen. It's going to take work. It's going to, like, we are so pampered.
Yeah. We're watching the show and going, wait, how did they shower? No, wait, they don't have a shower.
Right.
Oh, they got to go in the river. Wait, how did
they? No, and I'm OCD, like, oh my gosh, they had to get up in the middle of the night and go outside in the dirt in their bare feet, and then they got back into bed. Wait, what? They didn't have, no, anyways. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? I don't know if that was a good analogy, but to bring in like you're saying, we want everything to come easy, but there's work in this and it's active. And I think that's the one thing that maybe even you could talk more about in helping people understand that as you're coaching them. When they're in despair, they're in that depth of fear that they cannot budge, and helping them to come out of that place. Like that, yes, there is faith in this and steps you have to take and where God meets you in it. If you want to just.
Well, we want the fear to be removed so we can feel comfortable, but you actually often do things while you're afraid.
Right.
Knowing that I'm not going to let fear be the dominant motivator in my life. That's a decision that I made. Now, sometimes I got to go through the mountains and the valleys to come to terms with, oh, that's another fear that's motivating me, and I've been defending it. But once I see it, I've made a decision in my heart. God's goal for me is not my comfort. He's not looking at me going, man, I got to make sure Mark's comfortable. That's not in his grid for me.
Really?
His grid is my transformation and stretching. So going back to the Little House on the Prairie thing, at first it was a simple like, hey, kids, let's watch a show that I watched when I was a kid. And then it turned into like, wow, there were really great lessons in each thing.
Yeah.
And there was a ruggedness that they had that we've lost. In like, they had to settle down, find a plot of land. They're fighting off people. There's an animal that comes through.
Such a great show.
You know,
Pa saves the day every episode.
Mr. Edwards
Doc
gets
Baker.
mauled by a bear. You know what I mean? You're like, this is you know, they gotta fight for their food. They gotta fight. We have gotten into a very cushy tushy life that beware of that. Beware of where you just want to be comfortable. And I see a lot of people that are in a place where their life is safe and they got a decent salary, they got some decent things, but deep down inside, they're unfulfilled and they know there is a cry for more, right? But their fears have boxed them in. And when you live a life for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years where you just keep listening to fear that just kind of keeps conditioning and programming you, it really wears you down.
Yeah.
And so the fear gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, you're like, I could never do that. And it's like, no, you're just one facing fear away from this changing.
Right.
You just feels like, I think the pathway of fear goes like this. If I do this, this is going to happen, and then I'm going to die. I'm going to do this is going to happen, and then the world's going to collapse. I'm going to do this is going to happen. It's all just a big masquerade because, no, actually you're going to grow, but it's going to stretch you.
Yeah. If I could, I want to talk about just in our life, and specifically, you know, the fears that we've overcome. But I do think it is important for people to understand that I feel like that when we talk about fear, it's like outside exterior things. Like, I have a fear of driving, which is all very, you know, real fears. But at the core of battling fears, most of it has to do with broken relationships and passivity and things that you need to overcome in relationships that, to me, then once you're established in love, then those things, those other fears then can get conquered. Am I saying that correct? In what you?
I think so. So
like, you
Keep
know,
going.
I feel like that, and maybe it's getting to more even the roots of fears. So, you know, I don't want to jump around too much, but I think if we look back at our own life, when we look at exterior fears, like things that, you know, maybe you have had, and you can probably think of one right now, and I could think of something that happened a while ago, that if you had been raised or given more established love in your life, that then would help you with those fears that you thought were these giant monsters that you could not take on. Yeah,
I think that God designed us to be connected to tribe, meaning that mom and dad, sister, brother, the body of Christ, neighbors, that celebrate new milestones of facing fear.
Yeah, because it gives you a security and a stability to go, people have my back. I'm loved, I'm good, I'm safe, I can do that. Right. I can face that. So the difference between somebody, like, for example, I got like a pretty good fear of snakes moving down here. like I had Okay, that's a good one. I was working on rebuilding our deck. There were some problems with it, so what started as just replacing a couple of deck boards ended up me working on the whole thing. Well, anyways, one day I was walking across the joists, which are the supportive beams that go across, and I had a big beam with me that I was moving. I turned, and it was just a black rat snake.
Is that the right
Are
name
you
for it?
getting to know the different breeds now? This is good.
Them snakes.
Having to get to know. All I want to know is it a copperhead and is it going to bite me?
Them snakes down here.
Mm-hmm.
So I turn and look, and I see it coming towards me, and I literally turned into like a 6-year-old girl and just started like flailing. I hit my ankle, the board fell, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So anyways, the difference between me in that moment and somebody who handles snakes is really one thing. They just do it a lot. That's really what it comes down to. They just do it a lot. You face it, and you condition yourself to go, there's no fear here. I can overcome this.
Okay, but keep going with that. Where does that inner strength come from? Because it has to have a root. It has to have an anchor.
Right.
Let me use the word anchor.
Right. Well, the history in your life, we were meant and designed, and a lot of people hearing this are going to go, well, I didn't have that growing up. So I get that. But we were designed to have in us a celebration of stepping out. So, for example, like if we see Abby where, let's say she's very, very like shy with people or withdrawn, we're going to find out what's going on and encourage that area. And when she steps out, like, hey, that was awesome. That was great. So there becomes a calibration in you to face those things.
Right.
The more you face it, the more. So if you have public speaking and you're sweating like crazy when you speak in front of people, which I'm very familiar with that, like terrifying, like nauseating. I want to throw up before speaking kind of things that I'm very aware of. It's like, what's really the solution? Like, get up there constantly, keep doing it, and overcome with spiritual tools, with tools of understanding how your physiology works, stuff that we teach, spirit, soul, and body, to learn to overcome those areas. I really feel like facing it and then practicing it out.
Right.
So the next time I saw a snake, this one looked like a copperhead, but I wasn't really sure. But I had that instinctive fight or flight kick in, and then I had the knowing in me of, no, I'm not going to be afraid. And then I was more like, all right, what are we going to do here?
Right.
Which you don't want to like.
Right.
You don't want, even people who know how to handle snakes don't just go, flopping at them.
Hey, come here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's it's the internal compass. So for me growing up, I had the avoidance all the time. If something made me anxious, I just avoided it. And then I hid in shame about it. So if it was a speech I had to give, like, man, if I could be sick that day at school, that's great. If it's basketball practice was so stressful because I didn't feel like I could physically handle some of it. It's like I wanted to just get away from it. I couldn't wait till it was over at times. So it's even stealing the joy.
That's a good point.
Of stuff in your life, because it's just a stupid bully that just goes, ugh.
Right.
And we shriek back and we listen to it. You do that enough times, and now that's your conditioning.
Yeah, because I think if we were to really sit back, be silent, and look at the tapestry of our life and look at everything that we have going on and say, okay, what drives me to do that? Why am I okay, that's fear of, for me, interacting with someone and sounding a certain way or over talking because I'm insecure and they're not talking enough and I'm really fearful to get into that situation again, and so I'm just not going to go.
Right.
When you roll it back and you look at it,
right.
It's me rooted in fear and insecurity of who I am.
So this is what I think. I think it's so important to get more honest about the fear issues that you're currently wrestling with, because there's always new layers of it. It's never like you get rid of a fear and you're just totally conquering it. There's more layers. It's just how life works. Get used to it. But what we need to understand is underneath the fear is a treasure place that God can work at. Fear is branching off of something, right? We're afraid because, and there's a number of things. I get into it in my book. A lot of this is going to be an encouragement for you to get into I Will Not Fear and get into the materials that are covered there. But it's like our sense of love, our sense of safety, how we gain peace, what makes us feel secure. Confidence. We mentioned confidence. That's huge. How you maintain and cultivate a sense of confidence and hope about your day. Fear steals that. So if you look at your fear, underneath it is a place where love needs to have a deeper work. confidence needs to be rebuilt. Your hope needs to be made strong. It actually names the area that God is discipling you in. And people are not growing because they're not facing their fears. They're not being discipled by God. Oh, I want to get discipled, so I'm going to read my Bible and pray every day. No.
Yeah.
I hate to break your religious mores. Is that the right word? Mores or whatever the word is. But that's not how you spiritually grow. You said don't read your Bible and pray. That's not what I said.
Right.
I'm saying go out and face your fears, and reading the Bible will become totally different. Because our devotions are like, oh, Sarah and Abraham went and they ventured out. It's nice. I answered those 3 questions. I did my devotions. Right. That's where most people live. There isn't like, oh, what did Abraham actually do? How was he thinking going out into the middle of nowhere? I got to find this because I'm in the middle of this right now, and I need some answers. Now you're going to really get discipled because life has your attention. And most people live in they don't need God to show them. They don't need God to work because their life is set up pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
Money and, most Western culture too. Most people have a shelter. They have a place to live. Most people have food and then they have their job and, and all we're doing is just whining about what we don't have. Right.
Right.
And we're not really facing our fears and stretching. So I think the subject of fear is important because we got to discover what's under there that God's working on, and most people never get to it because they never get honest about it. And there's something on the other side of that fear that's waiting for you.
So can you give people an example of your own life of where you feel like everything you just laid out, you did?
Well, I grew up a very fearful person. My earliest memories were fearful, dark, kind of negative. Maybe that's just some bent of my memories that still needs some healing, but I think there's a lot of it where I just had an apprehension. I'm not saying I didn't have fun, didn't have friends, but there's just a lot of it that had that. So when it came to anything that stretched me, I had a lot of anxiety about it. I think what has helped me the most is I've had a compass of what's the right thing to do. So it caused me to push through. So for example, I got to give a speech in my speech class, and my speech teacher was tough. I mean, she was tough. If you're watching this, you were tough, and you know it.
What was her name?
And we joke about it to this day, right? And I was like, there were times where I'm like, oh, it's my turn, and I got to get up there and give an extemporaneous talk on just some subject you throw out at me, and I'm nervous, and I'm rocking the podium, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going, but it's like there was a compass in me that I developed where I'm like, I got to do this. I got to do it. I got to step up to this. So God's calling me to speak, and I remember in my younger years, my fear of public speaking was so bad, I would get nauseated and pretty close to throwing up every time. So it's like, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even eat, couldn't even do a whole lot. I couldn't even have like conversation because I was like obsessed, about failure and all that kind of stuff. And so I felt like facing it, but then it wasn't until much later in life that I was able to like get underneath this fear that I had, underneath it, meaning there's a spiritual battle and there's a love issue I haven't understood in the love of God. Do you want me to share some of my fears I had?
Sure. It's so funny though, before you do, as you're talking about facing it, because you and I grew up with a lot of the same like heaviness on us, but we're two different people in the way that we process things. So it's funny, you talk about pressing through and even standing up there with the podium, and see, I went the opposite direction. I had to give a speech. I went to the teacher, went to his office and said, I cannot do this. And he let me just give the speech to him. So I didn't face the fear. I made sure I did everything I could do to not do it.
Yeah.
So
not to throw your parents under the bus, but I do think that's something that a parent needs to keep an eye out for, of like, wait a second.
They didn't even know that was happening. So.
Right. No. Did our parents even know where we were?
I don't think so. Not me.
So like, but that's important, because in that moment, It's like right now, even with Abby, she's trying to decide on like what she wants to do. And she wants to quit one thing.
Oh, dance or piano, right? Mm-hmm.
You know, she takes piano lessons and there's dance, and she's kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to do both. And I kind of understand that. I don't want my kids involved in a million activities because it's just not healthy overall. That's a whole nother subject. But it's like we're kind of detecting, is fear owning the conversation?
Right, because we don't want her to be a quitter either. I don't want her to quit, and we need to stick with it. If we make a commitment, we stick to it. Because I gave up something in the first week and was allowed to.
If that quitter is established early, it'll follow you.
Right.
You know,
your mother didn't allow you to do that. You had the opposite.
Yes,
right?
yes and no. Because like I played trumpet and it hurt my lips because I had bigger lips, and then I was like, I don't want to push. So after a few years, I quit.
But years, I quit, and I joined Girl Scouts to become a brownie. And it stayed in the package. And I don't even think my mother returned it, that I never went to. I said, I don't want to go. Okay, you don't have to go.
So what, okay, so
no, but I'm sorry, you were going to.
No. So what needs to happen for somebody like you that's had conditioning to give into fear, quit right away?
Oh, I have to epic level.
A lot of us I relate to that in certain areas that I had to build. What do people do if they have that kind of history?
I have to, at times, make major decisions inside of myself to fight through that feeling. Every fiber of my being goes. It's like a self-sabotaging thing that comes over me. Even if we're going to have people over, it's like this. And I want to spend time with the people, but I have this internal self-sabotage on anything that has to do with like exerting. I shouldn't say exerting energy, but
putting
myself out there. And I think I think a lot of people can relate to this. I have a lot of markers in my life of like embarrassment where it just didn't go well. Like, so even as you were saying about the speech, I did an internal Rolodex in my own mind of when I had to give a speech. In that same class, we were talking about euthanasia. And should you, someone's older and they're sick, should you just put them down, basically, is what, And, or if someone is maybe in a car accident and they're on life support, why should we it was kind of that. So we had to argue it. Well, my uncle had just been killed within the past couple of years on a motorcycle accident. And that was in my mind. Now, I wasn't super close to him, but it was still a family tragedy and all of those things. And in my mind, that was what my reference went to. So I got very passionate in my talk about it. And I felt like in my talk, I looked around and people were staring at me like, calm down. You don't need to get this upset about it. And that shame of, I look like an idiot, those imprints of those things, that stuff has happened a lot to me throughout my life. I'm like, I don't want to feel that anymore. I never want to feel that again. It like grates me to even think about it.
Right.
So I have those markers inside of myself that I have a reference to that I'm like, no, don't feel that again. That I have to say, it won't be like this. It's okay. And even if I have to constantly talk myself through it. It's not those past references.
Right. I think I would go back a step further because I think there's something that fueled that decision. And I think what could fuel that decision, you correct me if I'm wrong, is what will happen if I don't deal with this? My life is going to go down a certain trajectory. Because I personally believe we don't change unless we get in touch with what will happen if I don't change, one, or two, loving myself enough to make the change. You know what I mean? Sometimes a combination of both or one or the other.
I would say it's the combination of that. Yeah.
Right? It's like doggone it, there's more for me. That's the loving yourself part. And then there's the like, if I don't stop changing my eating, I'm gonna die of diabetes. Like that kind of thing. And I think that's sobering. People say, well, then that's going to lead you into fear. Fear of I think I wouldn't call that fear. There's a sobriety of like, if I don't face this And I think that's what the Bible does a lot, is it's calling you to sobriety. And a lot of people hear it and go, oh, God's going to send us all to hell. And he's like, he's not trying to torment you. He's trying to bring sobriety.
Right.
But so anyways, there's something in you that says, I can't always keep doing that.
Right. And I will say my journey of getting established in God's love and then love in myself has been an easier internal dialogue. So for me, the anchor is the self-love. No, you're worth being in relationship with people. Yeah. You're okay. Your husband has your back. You are safe in this scenario. These are loving people. They're not going to, all of those things build over time. And I would say the big thing for me to be able to overcome fear is really me understanding that God loves me, and then working on me really having a value for myself. Because that's really what all those scenarios would point to. And that's the theme of my entire childhood, teen years, 20s, is zero self-value and zero self-love. So on the flip side of that, no one did, because I didn't put that out there. There was no boundaries. And so I had that little bit of self-awareness in me that I was like, oh, I'm going to be slick and just remove myself from these situations and stop inserting myself and to me looking like a fool.
Right.
Because I was like, never felt good enough.
A lot of honest people can relate to that.
Yeah.
They relate to that. Okay, so I did this exercise a long time ago and didn't even realize I did it. Many years later, I was going through some old journal entries, and it came up as I was thinking about this series, and we want to get into turning your fears into your greatest victories. So I was looking through just old files and stuff. And in the year 2000, I was 23, right? I wrote down my top 3 struggles, worries, fears, my fears.
Oh, you're such a good boy that you even did that. I was like, oh my gosh, what boy is there to You're like, you were just a great.
You just pet me like a cat. You're like, oh,
I know,
you
right?
I think I was in I was in a leadership course or something like that. Of
course you were.
And I had
such a good man.
And I had put it down. And do you want to hear them?
Of course, absolutely.
So this is my 23-year-old self-awareness, though. So the funny thing is, no anxiety, none of that is there, even though that's all deep under the root system. Number 1 was failure. Yeah. This top of my list.
Which I could see that with a performance.
Deathly afraid of failure. Hated making mistakes, because now looking back, it's like mistakes meant I was a failure. And the shame and all that kind of stuff. Number 2 was criticism. And I looked back, I was like, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, my big fear was criticism, hearing disapproval. So because my validation was based on what I did, and I did it perfectionistically, hearing that it's flawed was like the end. Rather than I've learned over the years, and I'm getting better and better at it now, is that you learn from failure.
Right.
You learn in the doing. And criticism can actually be helpful. And then this is an interesting one, number 3. And it really marks my journey of what I even now help people with. My 3rd fear was losing closeness with God. And that is all in what I talk about in the rejection mindset. It's just all fear, rejection based. It was this I don't want to screw this up. And I could at any moment, and anything I do could screw this up. And so, those are the top 3 things. Now in the next 20 years, I had to face a whole deeper layer, because as whoa as that sounds, I had to go even deeper. So what about you? You don't have to give 3, but what would be 20 years ago?
Yep.
You're in your 20s. What were your top 3 fears?
I would like to say that I was that much of an introspective. I guess I was, but I was so worried about, I guess, external, but what I thought was going to make me happy. Okay. So I was obsessed and so fearful about not being happy with the person I was going to marry.
So
that was like
would we call that
crippling fear.
Would we call that a fear of being relationally unfulfilled?
Yes. I still probably battle that a little bit.
With your husband?
Not with you, I'm saying. Not with you. With people. And I could point to some things of like disappointments in the church and things that we've been through that can fuel that I have to be careful not to make me a victim of it. But it was like mind blown when I met you and I could see I could be married to this person and have a life because of the stuff that we were working on together. I'd never felt that before. I had no idea. I saw me carrying everything, me being unhappy. I saw everybody else's marriage around me in full color picture of like, this one cheating, she's unhappy, he's passive. Like, I think even back then I wasn't aware of where God was going to take me to even use me and with you and everything, of how I looked at everything. But that terrified me.
You had mentioned earlier, you said that our fears, kind of took different pathways. I definitely relate to that.
Oh, definitely.
Because I was working as a pastor and I saw the worst of worst marriages. And subconsciously I was like, who wants to get into this?
Yeah.
Like half of them are getting divorced and half are really do not like each other. And then half of the half are like barely making. I mean, that was my narrative that I developed. There was some truth to it. I was like, why do I want to bother? And then I became like phobic of commitment.
Right.
And obsessive. That's a whole nother subject. We'll get to it another time.
We have another show about that.
Yeah. That's why, like, when people come to us and they're like, well, I have this. And we're like, yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
Because it feels like we've gotten the gamut. And maybe we just chose to just be okay with being honest about what we're facing.
Yeah.
Because that brings a lot of freedom. You take the shame off of something and it's like, oh, okay, here's what I got to do. And it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to overcome it and figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, give me another one.
So I think that I can relate to your fear of failure. That was a huge one for me. And it links to the fact that I never followed through with anything. So I had a fear that I was going to be 50, 60 years old and go, why didn't I go do that? But I could, like, I have this thing that I wish I had joined the military. Okay. I had was right there to join the Air Force and I was close. And my fear of failure, my fear of not making it, and really my family dismissing, like, yeah, no, you don't want to do that. I didn't step out and do that. And so to this day, I look at military things and I think, wow, I could have had like an amazing career in the military. I could have done these things and I haven't offered that. And, but it's that fear of that stepping out and fear of failing and panicking, just like I thought of about marriage. If I married this person, am I going to wake up in a year and go, oh, what did I do? That was it. If I join the military, am I going to wake up in a year and go, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. This like suffocating fear would come over me that either A, I was failing at it, or I was going to hate it and be trapped.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
I know I do. I totally relate to that. Yeah, absolutely. It held me back big time.
Yeah.
Until I faced it. So what is underneath that? Does it kind of go back to your upbringing grid of being challenged to face your fears, stretch, it's okay?
Yeah, so none of that was ever implemented in my life.
Because my parents looked at me, were like, what is this relationship thing with you? Like this fear.
Yeah.
Like they almost, they couldn't relate to it. And that's what made it even more challenging was people around me were like, you're fine. You don't have to obsess about that.
Right. And I think.
And it made me feel crazier.
Right, it does. And I can totally relate to that because in my relationship choices, it was more of the like, Missy, what are you doing? What are you doing? And there were some nice guys I dated and I had a long period with one that was not so nice. But there was never a good foundational education that I got on relationship. And listen, I've talked to my parents about a lot of these things and they go, yeah, listen, I had nothing to give, My father talks about, listen, I didn't know what the heck we were doing. We were just selfish, And so they know,
That's honest.
that there wasn't a place of even being able to give us much. But it probably looked on the surface like we were okay. Like if you watched maybe our family, although maybe you knew my family and you say, no, we thought you were crazy. You could have. But I think on the outside looking in, people thought, that's okay. Father owns a business and mother stayed home and, looks like it's decent, you know?
Right.
Then when you start breaking open the layers of it, and we know this too from helping families and counseling people and looking at things, when you start uncovering the layers of, okay, well, how did you talk to your kids about that? Well, I mean, they just went in their room and I don't know what to say. That's how my life was. Mm-hmm. Now, my mother was more of a talker, but again, she didn't know how to help us maneuver through things. And then my parents divorced when I was 6 and 12. Yes, that's a whole other story. So going through divorces and going through all those things and them having to figure out their own stuff, I don't know that there was much left for us. And so like a child of divorced parents and with there being, alcoholism and things like that in our family, I had a quadruple whammy of dealing with emotional health. And it took me a lot of years. I think that the big benefit that I was so grateful for with you and I getting together is the puzzle pieces came together. And I was on this journey and you were on yours. And when you and I met and you started even showing me the things that you were learning, I was like, oh, yes, that's it.
I got some hope.
Yes. It gave me something, again, I'll use the word anchor. It gave me something to anchor to go, I'm not crazy. I am not crazy. That was huge.
That's important. To that right there, what you just said is so important to feel, is that right there can knock off a lot of the battle. Is I'm not crazy. I'm just going through something here. There's a reason I'm going through it, and I'm going to learn. I'm going to figure it out. Now, something just popped into my head as you were talking. I'm going to throw it into the mix, and you tell me if this was a part of your battle. The feelings of certain fears could come on so strong. Mm-hmm. I thought it was God.
Oh, absolutely.
So I didn't have a discernment grid. Like I heard the scripture, God's not giving you a spirit of fear, but practically speaking, I was like, oh, this must be like a fear of the Lord. And I was confused about what that even meant. I just had this, the feeling was so strong that I was like, this must be God. I need to act on it. I even made like way back when, I was working at a big church, we even some hiring decisions. I would have like this fear of failure come over me and change a hiring decision. Like when I look back at it, I go, oh man, God, thank you for your grace. Mm-hmm. That here I am like lock, stock, and barrel, kind of like moving with what fear was saying to me. And that's really confusing when you feel like God is using it to speak to you, to give you direction.
Yeah.
If I kept following that was going to lead me on some really dangerous paths.
Lonely, big time, and insanity.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it tormented every area of your life too. And I can relate to it on so many ways too. Now, I know that you do help a lot of people with that kind of like religious, we'll call it religious OCD thinking.
Yeah.
But do you think that working at a church like that and the like thing you were held to made it worse? Or do you think it was just part of you, what was going on in you?
Yeah, and when I look back, I don't necessarily think that there was like this huge added pressure from the culture, the church culture, so to speak. But it is a machine, and the machine is constantly putting out things.
Yeah.
So it very subliminally teaches you to kind of live in performance mode, always producing things, putting out.
Probably not want to fail the people.
Correct. So it doesn't help someone with my makeup who wants to please God, is scared of not pleasing God, and then portrays that in everything, trying to do everything right. And there's a lack of identity, lack of belonging, lack of feeling safe. It made it very challenging in this. I think the biggest thing for me was I entered in very, very young and didn't have a framework to go, let me figure things out. Right. I don't blame that on anyone. And I think God still used it mightily, but it caught up to me later where there were certain areas. I was very mature, like decade beyond my age, in like certain quote ministerial things, but I was behind. I was like emotionally, if I could use this term, emotionally undeveloped to my age in personal areas.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to deal with that because you're always in kind of your mode.
Right. You always had the fabrication of Pastor Mark on that no one could really touch it unless they got into that inner world a little bit and came into confrontation with it. Would they really know? Yeah.
Right. I don't even know then that they would.
Well, that's true.
It either.
Is there anything else you want to share? Do you want to talk about some maybe things that you can give people? We've talked about a bunch of things, and we've shared some of our own personal fears.
Well, I'd like to take a 3-hour tour through my childhood.
You should. It might help. Everybody got that time?
I think that in looking at today's episode, what I wanted to do was just kind of just open up the dialogue to encourage people to not be in shame about what they're afraid of, get more honest about it, have some good discussions, but let's stop defending the fears and let's start moving in some good directions. And I've got some things that I'd like to encourage you to take advantage of. We're going to do a whole series on it, so feel free to send in your questions. Our goal is turning your fear into your greatest victories. We'll get into anxiety, worry, panic attacks. We're going to do a little bit on OCD. We're going to get into some financial fear kind of stuff. That's a big topic. Some top fears that you'd want to address in your life. I would like to see this become a place of discussion amongst you and those you love around you. But if I can get my mouse to work here. Okay. I want to let you know that if this episode has meant anything to your life, it's been a blessing, and it's helping you, it's encouraging you, what we're saying is bearing witness, go to markdejesus.com, click on the donate button, consider a one-time donation, or consider our partnership program. There's 2 options that you can consider. I also, for this series, I want to make available to you a free set of resources. It's absolutely free. It's just a email list sign up. And what will happen is when you click on it, I'll put it in the show notes. And when you click on it, you'll be put on a mailing list that will send you some emails from me. It has some free downloads, some documents. It has some videos that's going to kind of help walk you through some things you need to understand. You can begin, whether you struggle with anxiety or whether you're just like, I want to get real about some of these things, or you have some mental health battles or whatever it is. But really the biggest take home, if you're ready to jump in and like, man, you know what? I want to see my life change. I want to see my direction change. I don't want to keep, like I was talking about with Melissa, just don't want to stay in this. I've got to get in touch with what's possible if I push through these fear areas. I got a great 28-day process. It's called I Will Not Fear. The book is available in paperback, audio, and Kindle. You can also get a copy of the e-course that in video, I teach it out in a 28-day process. You can go through it. Take your family through it. I mean, some of you parents are listening to this, you're going, man, or you've got kids, like take them through it, get some discussion going and get this into your understanding. I'm praying that out of our transparency, where we have sought to be just honest about what we've been through, we just scratch the surface. I mean, we could go on. And we don't obsess about our fears, but we get honest about them. The shame breaks off. And then we get a strategy of, okay, God, this is where you're going to disciple me now. Of wherever your fear is, it usually lies some of the great jewels that God's going to do in your life. Yeah. So we pray this has been a blessing to you, to those you love. Share it on social media. Share it with those that you care about, and comment on it. Anything else?
I think that's great.
Yeah.
You summed it up.
We look forward to seeing you guys next time. We love you. Live healed, freed, and transformed. And we'll see you in the next episode. God bless you.
Thank you, everyone.